think the book is shocking. I'm glad that it's shocking. A lot of shocking books.
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Atira, and today I'll be tackling a novel that has sparked endless debate in society, and it is quite a controversial novel if I do say so myself. And I am going to be talking about Lolita today.
Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Lolita, the tip of the tongue taking a trip of 3 steps down the palate to tap it free on the teeth. Lolita.
So, Lolita. Some people do know this book. Some people don't know this book. Some people have heard about Lolita. Some people have not heard about Lolita. So, when you think of Lolita, what do you think of first? Some people might think, oh, it's a novel that is glorifying pedophilia. It's a novel that is very sad. A story about a very disgusting man taking advantage of his own stepdaughter. And 3, it's a romance novel, which is quite concerning because it is not. Alright, people think like the character in this book it's a romance book, but it's not. Alright, now for some, Lolita is just another book that they've heard about, maybe online or pop culture. But beneath this story, beneath this infamous book, lies a very misunderstood story. The author, Vladimir Nabokov, I'm sorry for pronouncing his name wrong, wrote this book not to glamorize pedophilia and also not to glamorize the horrifying and disturbing relationship between Hbert and Dolores, but it is to discuss things that have been known and things that are still used to be normalized in the past, or some parts of other countries are normalized, but it still is happening in this age. So before I talk about how misunderstood this book is, and I'm going to delve into the parts that truly emphasize how horrible the main character is, which is Hbert, and how unreliable he is. This video will be a 3-part series where I'll be talking about not just the book itself. I will also be talking about the adapted films that were based on this book from the 60s and from the 90s, and I will also be talking about how the things that were written in this book are still happening and are still affecting the society today, and the same way with how it affected the society back then. Also, in the description box, I will be including a blog that I wrote myself, which is a step-by-step guideline on how to recognize and understand sexual behaviors from adults that are being inflicted on children. Feel free to check it out after this video or whenever you are free to do so. Now, before I begin, I would like to tell you the history on how I uncover this book. So I first discovered Lolita by accident. You know, when you're on the internet, you find things that you're looking for, or the things that you are not looking for. So I came across Lolita on YouTube actually, and I actually discovered the film, the 90s version, titled Lolita, obviously, and I watched some of the scenes on YouTube, and my curiosity grew, and when I realized that it was based on a book, I was intrigued, and I then watched a lot of video essays that were made based on this book and how people misunderstood this book and how this book was and still is being romanticized by others, it piqued my interest to learn more about it by reading it first. So I bought this book this year actually, and when I read it, I realized how disturbing it was, and it took me a couple of days to truly recover by this book. So to start, before I dive deeper into the book itself, I want to make something clear. Vladimir Nabokov, the author, did not want a cover of little girls or a little girl on his book. He did not want any picture of a kid, of a child, of a little girl especially. And the first book that he released, the cover was just the title itself. No other pictures or no other images were on that book until a few years later when the 60s version film came out, and the aesthetic of Lolita, which is the heart-shaped sunglasses, the lolly, and red lipstick, were sort of like, when people think of Lolita, they will think of the heart-shaped sunglasses, the lolly, and things like that. And that's when book publishers decided to publish books with an image like this. We must remember, Dolores Hayes, the child of this book, is 12. So imagine putting a picture of something like this, of a 12-year-old girl, on a book that is based on how gruesome and traumatizing her life was with Hbert. I mean, the book cover itself makes people think that this book is nothing more than just a romance, or let's say a forbidden romance book, which is not what this book is about. And it triggers me that something like this, the cover itself, is still being sold everywhere, in Kinokuniya, in MPH, and I actually bought this book from Shopee, and it angers me and it terrifies me whenever I see the cover. So this book is being narrated by Hbert, which he is an unreliable narrator, and he becomes infatuated with Dolores Hayes, who is 12 at the time. And what makes this novel very challenging to others to read, or to the people who have read it first time, is because of how manipulative the narrator is, and how he wants to make sure that the things that he says in the book will come across as sympathetic, or to allure readers to feel sorry for him, which I think the author himself did a very good job to when it comes to pulling the readers in and sort of like brainwashing their mind with the disgusting narrator.
Well, let's get down to the really intriguing point, Mr. Nabokov. What gave you the idea for Lolita, the story of a middle-aged man and a 12-year-old girl and their love affair?
Yes, yes.
How did you start it?
Well, in a little afterpiece which I have to my book, I talk about a certain ape who was taught to use a charcoal and to sketch and the first thing that the poor little animal did was to sketch the bars of its own cage. You see.
Is this an analogy?
Yes, I read that story in a newspaper, and if I try to rationalize the impact of that image, I would say that my baboon, Hbert, because after all, Hbert is a baboon of genius perhaps, but a baboon, is doing exactly that, you see. He's drawing and shading and erasing and redrawing the bars of his cage. The bars between him and what he terms the human herd.
And this cage, I take it, is this obsessive and rather frightening love
It is
For this girl.
Yes, it is his passion, the pattern of his passion.
Now, to start, this book, Lolita, was published in 1955, and since the very beginning, this book was very controversial, and it was written by Vladimir Nabokov, a Russian-American author, and he was well aware of how sensitive this specific book was at the time. And he said that Lolita is not about romance or forbidden romance or things like that. It is about an abuse of innocence, a power imbalance. And Hbert, the narrator of this book, is not only unreliable, not only manipulative, but also evil. And he desires and he is obsessed with Dolores Hayes, who he nicknamed Lolita. So Lolita is not actually the girl's name. The girl's name is actually Dolores Hayes. So Nabokov intended Lolita as a criticism of how some adults like to exploit children. It is a very dark exploration of how a young girl's innocent, how it's easy for young girls to be manipulated and for their innocence to be taken away by a very powerful adult. And what is particularly unique about this book is the writing itself. How Nabokov wrote very gruesome details of how Hbert, the things that he did to Dolores is not only poetic, but also humorous in a way. And it is to lure readers into Hbert's disgusting mind and making them complicit in his warped imaginaries and perspective. And he wanted readers to see Hbert's actual darkness and not to sympathize with it. Although I myself found myself sympathizing with Hbert, to the point where I questioned myself whether he was innocent or not, which is not what you should do when you read this book. But has that message ever been clear? Unfortunately, to some people, the answer is no.
Leaving Bryceland, Loquacious Low was silent. Cold spiders of panic crawled down my back. This was an orphan. This was a lone child, an absolute waif, with whom a heavy-limbed, foul-smelling adult had had strenuous intercourse 3 times that very morning. And whether or not the realization of a lifelong dream had surpassed all expectation, it had, in a sense, overshot its mark and plunged into a nightmare. I had been careless, stupid, and ignoble, and let me be quite frank, somewhere at the bottom of that dark turmoil I felt the writhing of desire again, so monstrous was my appetite for that miserable nymphette. Mingled with the pangs of guilt was the agonizing thought that her mood might prevent me from making love to her again as soon as I found a nice country road where to park in peace. In other words, poor Hbert was dreadfully unhappy, and while steadily and inanely driving toward Leppingville, he kept racking his brains for some quip under the bright wing of which he might dare turn to his seatmate. It was she, however, who broke the silence. "Oh, a squashed squirrel," she said. "What a shame."
Now, let's talk about Hbert and Dolores, or the way the author Nabokov portrays both of them. So Hbert is often romanticized as a tragic, even pitiful character in adaptations, but in the book, he's actually deeply manipulative and unreliable, and through his twisted narration on how the things that he wants to do to Dolores and things that he wants to do to others and the things that he thinks about is truly disgusting. Honestly, when I read this book, they were terrifying. And through his twisted narration, we can see how Dolores is being filtered through his obsessive and self-justifying mind. He uses a lot of flowery language to mask his actions, hoping that the readers, us, will focus on his suffering and his and feel sympathy towards him and the horrible things that he inflicts on Dolores. And the reason why he uses a lot of flowery language is because he is actually an intellectual. But this is why Hbert is a scary man. Not only he is an intellectual, but he is also charming, and people will never bat an eye whenever they see him across the street. Nobody will think that he is a groomer, a pedophile, because of the reputation that he has built for himself, which is honestly terrifying. There are many examples that I want to talk about from this book. The amount of flowery languages that you can find in this book when it comes to him masking his terrible actions are uncountable, honestly. So one of the first examples is this one. This is actually one of my personal favorites, which is quite concerning. So there would have been a lake, there would have been an arbor in flame flower, there would have been nature studies, a tiger pursuing a bird of paradise, a choking snake sheathing whole the flayed trunk of a shoat. There would have been a sultan, his face expressing great agony, belied as it were by his moulding caress, helping a Calais Pygian slave child to climb a column of onyx. There would have been those luminous globals of gonadal glow that travel up the opalescent sides of juke boxes. There would have been all kinds of camp activities on the part of intermediate group, canoeing, quaranting, combing curls in the lakeside sun. There would have been poplars, apples, a suburban Sunday. There would have been a fire opal dissolving within a ripple ring pool, a last throat, a last drop of color, stinging red, smarting pink, a sigh, a wincing child. Now, what do you think those sentences mean? Exactly what it is. So this is one of the examples of the flowery language that he uses a lot when it comes to the things that he does to Dolores without her consent, or even without. She was 12. Let's just say that. And this happens in the motel that they were in, and she wanted to show him the game that she played with one of her friends at her summer camp, but he took advantage of her and basically did something that traumatized her until a dying breath. So for Dolores, her characteristic is far more complex than a typical young girl, as it being seen through Humbert's point of view. She's not just a passive victim. Despite her very tragic circumstances, Nabokov hints at her resilience and attempts to assert her own agency. And in this book, we can see a part of Dolores that is truly opposite to the things that are being told by Hbert to us. And truly, this book, since it is based on Humbert's point of view, he truly controls how we see Dolores and how we see her character. And she is a reminder of the victims who are often silenced and misrepresented by society or by the people who hurt them. Dolores' innocence is exploited by Hbert, and Nabokov's portrayal emphasizes the dangers of idealizing such relationship. So as you may know, readers and books these days, there are many genres when it comes to romance, right? We all know enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, and things like that. But there is also a genre called forbidden romance, like professor, a student, and things like that. But that is not something that we should idolize or glamorize, because it is very dangerous to wanting something like that and to want to be in a relationship with. Why do you want to be in a relationship with your teacher? Why do you want to be in a relationship with your stepfather? It's not something you should be aiming for or imagining yourself in. So the fact that people think that this book is a romance book about Dolores, who Hbert himself calls her a seductress, a temptress, is truly concerning, and it truly angers me that till this day people think that Dolores is a seductress. She was the one who seduced Hbert when in fact she was 12. She was 12. And Hbert is a grown man. We can see Dolores' character in this book, and one of the examples are this one. In page 159, "You chump," she said, sweetly smiling at me. "You revolting creature. I was a daisy fresh girl, and look what you've done to me. I ought to call the police and tell them you raped me. Oh, you dirty, dirty old man." And that is when the facade and the image of Dolores that were being told by Hbert to us, we truly could see that Dolores was raped, was being taken advantage of by her own stepfather. And that is all from me for today. Stay tuned next week for a new video where I will be talking about the films that were adapted by this book and how it truly emphasized how misunderstood this book is. So I'll see you next week. Bye.